And the default mode network in the brain is that voice that's talking to you in your head that you listen to, that is just a combination of hardwired circuits that cause the brain to fire in its holistic way. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Let's begin. But it's not about looking for the outcome. It's about being in the emotional state where you feel like the outcome has already happened. And if you feel like it's already happened, you don't feel separate from it. You can't look for it. There's no reason to look for it. Your body's energetically and emotionally connected to that future. And being able to stay there enough times all of a sudden causes a dissolution, a denaturing of that belief. And how do we know we're getting close? The synchronicities, the feedback in our life. And it takes practice. Now, people who truly get serious about this and take it on, they're not doing it like, how long did I meditate? They're not doing it like, did I do the meditation good or bad? They're doing it because they understand if they change their state of being, if they change their belief, if they practice that formula, they're doing it over and over again to see if it produces an outcome in their life. They're experimenting with it. They don't say it didn't work. They say, I got to keep practicing it. And you know when you're close, when you decide to do it again, not because you want to heal, you want to get better at changing your state of being and staying conscious. Then all of a sudden, it's no longer about healing. It's about change. When it becomes about change and no longer healing, healing becomes the side effect. And people have done this numerous times in this work where they just said, I worked so hard, I'm so happy with myself, it really doesn't matter if I have this disease anymore. That's the moment it goes away because they're no longer identifying with the disease emotionally in the same way. So changing the belief and perception requires coming out of your resting state, and it's raising your energy, raising your emotions, and combining that with a very clear intention. And when you combine those two in the present moment, the body emotionally is believing it's in that future, in the present moment. And that's when the belief starts to change. That's when the healing starts to begin. That's the body living in that future in the present moment. Practice that enough times in your waking day, your beliefs about yourself and your life begin to change because the feedback says you're doing it properly. So Julie did it exactly right. Ask the question before you go to bed. Open the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. I've done it enough times. Wait for the answer. Well, the insight doesn't change anything. Now the question is, what are you going to do with it and how are you going to change it? So beliefs are changed by changing your energy. We teach 3 basic reasons that we meditate. And one of those 3 is when we're truly engaged in the meditative process, the act of changing your brain waves and slowing them down gets beyond the analytical mind. And what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. Now, there's nothing wrong with the analytical mind. I like my analytical mind. I love to learn. I love to weigh what I know against what I don't know. I like to be challenged in my life and navigate ethically and use my awareness in that beta brainwave pattern, low beta brainwave pattern. If there's a challenge or adversity in the environment and you feel prepared for it, like giving a speech in front of a group of people and it's your first time doing it and you've practiced and you're prepared, your brain will move into kind of a eustress, a good stress, and your brain will become a little bit more elevated with energy. But as you begin to act, as you begin to demonstrate, as you begin to do something and you're prepared, the mid-range beta brainwave pattern serves you. But when you're in a high beta brainwave pattern and over-aroused because of fear, because of pain, because of aggression, anger, that high beta brainwave pattern, we get stuck there. And we then become overly analytical or overly critical. And the default mode network in the brain is that voice that's talking to you in your head that you listen to, that is just a combination of hardwired circuits that cause the brain to fire in its holistic way. So what happens with certain people's default mode network is it never shuts off. And so they tend to overanalyze. And in our research, the overanalysis in a familiar emotion that's disturbing or based in the stressed hormones tends to drive the brain further into a higher analytical process. And at the same time, not only does it get overly analytical, but we're thinking in the past if we're living by those emotions, and the brain starts compartmentalizing, starts no longer functioning in an integrated way. And of course, people use all kinds of modalities or exogenous substances to try to settle the brain down. And if it works, then they become dependent on whatever it is that's doing it. I want people to learn how to do it without anything outside of them, to learn a formula to be able to change it inside of them. So what we found out was when people get overly analytical, they get overly focused. When they get overly focused, they tend to narrow their focus on one thing. And that's the voice in their head that keeps obsessing about something. And it leads to all kinds of behavioral problems, all types of difficulties with health, insomnia, anxiety, depression, neuroses. You get the idea. So in our research, Polyana, we found out that by going from that kind of narrow focus on everything material, everything known, to an open focus, to a broadening focus, and sensing nothing, the act of sensing emptiness of nothing, sense of opening our focus, and the Buddhists have done this for thousands of years, starts to cause the brain to slow down in its brainwave patterns, and we begin to move beyond the analytical mind. But what we found was a few things. Not only was the brain changing its brainwave patterns in the neocortex, the thinking brain, the brainwave slowing down caused the brain to all of a sudden start to become more integrated and more orderly, and different compartments start to unify and they begin to synchronize, and the brain starts organizing into greater communities of networks that are working together instead of against each other. It's no longer a house divided against itself. So by slowing the brainwaves down into alpha and producing more coherence in alpha, the brain starts building energy, because the interference, the constructive interference of coherent patterns begins to cause energy to amplify. The two waves that begin to oscillate in same patterns causes the interference to create bigger waves. And so the person has more awareness, more consciousness. They have a greater frequency in their brain. There's more energy, and it's more constructive in a sense. And when this happens, the default mode network in the brain tends to shut off. You're no longer hearing a voice in your head that's talking to you. In fact, when you're in that coherent alpha pattern, the brain all of a sudden starts to see an imagery in colors and pictures. It's an imagination state. It's a dreaming state. It's the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opening up, because you're passing those critical facilities in the brain. And when that's done properly, the voice in your head that says, I can't, it's too hard, I'm not good at this, my life will never change, there's not enough time, I don't know what I'm doing, all that chatter that we listen to when we fight against is silenced. Now, we looked at this because Yale was doing studies on the default mode network, and we were curious to see if there was a correlation. Because if it's done properly and there's more coherence in the brain, the default mode network in the brain shuts off during the meditation, which is great. But if you practice getting beyond your analytical mind, anything you practice, you become. You get skilled at it. It becomes a habit. So the people who are able to produce those coherent alpha patterns tend to stay in coherence longer, and they're less affected or abused by their own mind. They're less judgmental of themselves and others. They're less critical of things in their environment that could make them unhappy. They just tend to have less voices in their head that's always there, especially during survival or when we're living in separation. You know, why isn't this working? How come I'm not this? How come I'm not that? All that stuff. That tends to go away, and you're more present in the moment. So if we scan people's brains, again, at the end of the day, who have this kind of change that takes place to varying degrees, and many of them in a substantial way, just have that default mode shut off, and they're happier. They're more present. They're more neuroplastic. They're more spontaneous. They can improvise. They're more creative. They're more innovative. They have a happier presence and a sense of humor about them. So then there's nothing wrong with the analytical mind. It's just when we're really going to get beyond the conscious mind, which is 5% of the total mind by the time we're in the middle of our life, and the subconscious mind are all those things, those hardwired thoughts and attitudes and beliefs, those habits, how we speak, our emotional reactions, the emotions that feel familiar to us. That's where the programs exist down there that are running unconsciously or automatically. And just like your phone, if you got a lot of apps open or a lot of programs open, you drain your battery. And so the same thing happens with the body. So when we begin to get beyond the analytical mind, we're entering the operating system. In the neocortex, in beta, we're separate from it. But when we slow the brainwaves down and we can truly begin to imagine and rehearse a new way of being, and we can begin to plan our behaviors when we're with our children, when we're in a staff meeting, when we're going to practice our meditation. This is nothing mystical about this. The act of planning what you're going to do or reviewing in your mind what you're doing, if you're done properly, is truly pictures and images. That's the creative state, alpha. And in this kind of creative state, in alpha, where as we rehearse, we're actually priming the brain and body ahead of the environment. Do it enough times and you're installing the hardware. Keep installing the hardware and the hardware becomes more like a software program. So we got to get beyond the analytical mind, move into alpha, silence the critic in our brain that's saying, are you doing this right? How long is it going to take? Am I doing it wrong? Is it going to work? That's all the fanfare that's stopping you from crossing the bridge. If you truly can slow your brainwaves down and you're truly there, there's nothing mystical about this. You're driving on the freeway in your car and you're in trance and you're inward. That's exactly the process, just relaxing into the present moment. And now, when we do this properly, we can begin to, in imagery, in pictures, truly begin to rehearse. And if you're doing it properly, the brain doesn't know the difference between the real life experience and the one you're imagining. And so the experience enriches the brain. So the brain looks like it's already had the experience. Install the hardware in that way and keep doing it, firing and wiring. The hardware becomes a software program, becomes more automatic, and you begin to behave that way. You begin to act that way. You begin to think that way. You begin to feel that way. You begin to change truly who you are. So my effort is to demystify the process. And practicing, as you'll learn, Polyana, when you come to the week-long, I'm going to give you numerous opportunities to practice and numerous opportunities to get beyond yourself and your analytical mind. And in the beginning, it takes a little effort to disentangle from those hardwired programs and emotional conditioning. But if we keep practicing, you keep building the model and you keep doing it, you'll begin to notice that you don't have that voice in your head that's always talking to you. In fact, when it stops talking to you, the side effect of it is you're truly happy. You could be happy, in love with life, and you start analyzing and thinking. The act of analysis is polarizing it. It's duality. It's opposites. It's known and unknown. It's past and future. It's good and bad. It's all the stuff that divides our experience and separation. So you can explain this, but you got to get in the process of doing it. And we just see great, great changes to that default mode because you're practicing getting beyond your analytical mind. And if you keep practicing it, sooner or later, it's just going to work when you want to access it and not when you want to change. And that's the key.